Have you ever felt like no matter what you say, your stepkids just shut you down? Or worse, they fire back with, "You're not my mom," or something like that. Yeah, I have been there too. Today, we are unpacking these conversations with your stepkids, why they matter so much, how to avoid the biggest landmines, and exactly what to say based on their age and your situation. Welcome, welcome. Okay, so let's talk about something that's been coming up a lot lately in my DMs, in the step family circle, and honestly, in conversations that I have had with stepmoms everywhere. And it is this: how in the heck do you actually talk to your stepkids in a way that doesn't backfire? You want to connect, you want to be helpful, you want them to know you care, but every time you try to have a real, actual conversation, it blows up in your face. They shut down, they give you one word answers, or my personal favorite, "You're not my mom," right? That just makes you want to crawl into a hole. And what I'm seeing online right now, stepmoms are posting in Facebook groups on Reddit and TikTok, and they're asking variations of the same kind of question. How do I talk to my stepkids without making it worse? And there are threads with a million comments, and the advice is all over the place. Some people say just be yourself. Others say stay out of it. Let your partner handle absolutely everything. And some are like, you need to establish authority right away or they're going to walk all over you. No wonder stepmoms are confused, right? So I want to give you a little bit of a framework today, not a script that you have to memorize word for word, because honestly, that's going to sound fake and weird and it's just not going to hit every situation, right? But I want to give you a way of thinking about these conversations that actually works. We're going to talk about why these conversations matter so much, the common mistakes that actually make things worse. And then we're going to get into some age appropriate ways to connect with your stepkids that don't feel forced or awkward. And look, I am not going to pretend I got this right from day one. I have literally made every mistake in the book. I have been too pushy. I've been too distant. I've tried to be the cool stepmom, the authority figure, and everything in between. But through a lot of trial and error, and ultimately a whole lot of research and examining the research that's been done, I've figured out what actually works. So let's dive in. All right. So first things first, why do these conversations even matter? Can you just not coexist? Show up, be polite, let time do its thing? Well, here's the deal. Research shows us that one of the biggest factors in whether a stepfamily thrives or just survives is the quality of the relationships in the stepfamily, especially between the stepparent and the stepkids. And that relationship doesn't just happen. It's built, and it's one conversation at a time. Now, you may be saying, "Okay, Cameron, I've tried to talk to them. They don't want to talk to me." And I hear you. But here is what I've learned. Honest, intentional conversations are really one of the few tools we have to actually build real trust inside our blended families. And when you can communicate with empathy and respect, when you acknowledge the weirdness of the situation instead of pretending everything's fine, you can kind of start to chip away at those walls. You can lessen some of those loyalty binds that makes kids feel like they have to choose between loving you and loving their other parent. You can help them see you as an actual person, not a threat. So let me tell you a story that really drives this home for me. Early on in our blended family, and if you have been a follower for a while, if you're in the step family circle, you may have heard me talk about this, but Craig and I sat down and we created house rules. We were all in on co-parenting with each other. He wanted me to feel respected as a partner, so he suggested that I present these rules to the kids. Now, if you are cringing or grimacing, your reaction is 100% right. At the time, I thought, cool, this is me stepping into my role. This is me being a parent, an authority figure. So we got the kids together for a family meeting and I laid out the rules. Be respectful, clean up after yourself, no phones at dinner, keep your doors open. That one right there, that was the kicker. I thought this was all standard stuff, right? But the kids, they had some pretty hard reactions. I mean, the open door situation, one of my stepdaughters was just looked at me, rolled her eyes and was like, "No, that's not happening." And the others just kind of stared at me. And I was like, what in the world is going on? But that is the moment I realized you can set down all the rules you want. But when you don't have that relationship yet with your stepkids, that is just not going to land. Being the adult doesn't automatically grant you influence, right? You have to earn trust and love and the relationship before you earn authority. So what does that mean practically? It means the conversations that you have with your stepkids early on are not going to be about laying down the law. They're going to be laying the groundwork for connection. Patricia Papernow likes to talk about connection before correction, right? And it really makes sense. It's about showing up as someone who cares, someone who listens, someone who sees them as actual human beings with their own feelings and perspectives, because that's really kids want to be seen, right? And it can feel vulnerable to be that way because what if you show up with empathy and they totally reject you, right? What if you try and it doesn't work? So here's what I'll say to that. You cannot control how they respond. I talk a lot with the stepmoms that I work with about what you can control and what you can't control. You cannot control how your stepkids are going to respond to you. You can't, but you can control how you show up. And showing up with intention, with curiosity instead of judgment, is always the right move, right? All right, so we've talked about why these conversations matter. Let's talk about the mistakes that can make everything harder because I've seen them all. I've made most of them, and I see other stepmoms making them every single day. The first one is the biggie, and that's engaging in discipline too soon. This is really the big one. You move in, you get married, suddenly you're expected to co parent. I've already talked about how my husband was really excited to have a parenting partner on board. And I was really excited to be that parenting partner. I didn't have kids of my own. And I really was thinking that this was going to be an instant family and that, we were going to all have these Rockwell holiday dinners and all that kind of stuff. So you join the family and you co parent. You start setting boundaries, you start enforcing rules, you start correcting behavior because that's what parents do, right? Except one big thing you're not their parent and they don't see you as one, right? So when you jump into discipline mode, before you've built any kind of a relationship, it's going to backfire hard. Research tells us that step parents who try to establish structure without establishing that connection end up in kind of a rejection cycle, right? The kids push back. So the step parent feels disrespected. So they double down on the rules. And then that makes the kids push back even harder. And it's a vicious cycle, right? I lived this. The house rules moment I told you about, that was me trying to establish authority before I had the relationships, and it did not work. So what do you do instead? You let your partner handle the discipline, at least in the beginning, until you have established that relationship, which does take time, right? And it is hard for your partner to understand that they have to be the bad cop pretty much all the time, but they do. Your job as a step parent is to build trust and build that relationship. You need to be the safe adult who listens, who doesn't judge, who makes space for their feelings. So let me tell you another story to talk about this. One day after, it wasn't that long after Craig and I got married, I opened our front door and I found two police officers standing there. They were responding to a 911 call that had come from the house from my youngest stepson. All I had done was ask him to come inside from playing and take a shower. And the police officer said, did you call 911? He said, yeah. They said, well, why did you call 911? And he said, I didn't want to take a shower, right? But this sweet, sweet boy who has a traumatic brain injury, he was not having the shower. He was not having me, his new stepmom, telling him what to do. So in a rage, he called the cops. And when they showed up, he was proud, at least for the first 30 seconds. I, however, was completely mortified. I was embarrassed. We were in a new neighborhood that was a really nice neighborhood, and we had a cop car on our front lawn. But more than that, I was heartbroken because I realized a few things in that moment. And I realized it wasn't about me being a bad stepmom, although I did feel pretty bad, but it was about a kid who'd been through a lot of trauma who wasn't going to respond to new authority or even logic or even reasoning the way that I thought he would. And that moment forced me to let go of trying to exert my authority. I did not yell at him. I did not fuss at him. I explained the situation to the police, who, by the way, were absolutely wonderful. And I let them go upstairs and talk to him about what happens when you call 911 and you don't need it. And they had a great conversation with him about how that can take their resources from people who really need it. And he was appropriately apologetic. And, they left him with like a young deputy sticker or something and went on their way. If you can let go of trying to run a tight ship or show up as an equal parent, it works. What could I have done in that moment? Now, I had no idea that he was going to call 911, right? But when he was putting up such a fuss about taking a shower, I could have let that go and let my husband handle it when he got home, right? When you can let go of trying to run a tight ship or trying to be an equal parent, it works. Not overnight. This stuff is not fast, but over time, it takes the pressure off of you, takes the pressure off of your stepkids, and you can focus instead on building your relationship with them. All right. On the flip side, here's a mistake that stepmoms make. They go in the opposite direction. They are so eager to bond that they share way too much, way too fast. Especially, this happens a lot when the kids are preteens or teens and you kind of feel like they're developing and they can handle more adult conversations. But stepmoms will talk about their own childhood trauma or their struggles with their partner's ex. And by the way, this is the kid's mom, right? Like you should not be talking about that with the kids. Or they talk about how hard it is to be a stepmom with the kids. So it's a well-meaning attempt to connect. But just because the kids may be teens or young adults, just because they can more easily relate to adults does not mean that they can handle all the topics. They cannot, and they should not. They are not your therapist, right? When you dump your emotional stuff on them, you're asking them to carry a weight that they are not equipped to carry, and it puts pressure on them, makes them uncomfortable, and it can actually push them further away. So be authentic with them. Absolutely. Be real, but be boundaried, right? Your emotional processing should happen with your partner, your therapist, or your stepmom community, not with your stepkids. All right, let's talk about the third one. This is trying to rush the bond. So a little bit of what I dealt with when I first became a stepmom, right? You want to feel like a family. You want to skip over all the awkward stuff and get to the part where everyone feels comfortable, everyone's connected. I'm sorry. Blended families just don't work that way. Research tells us that it takes an average of 4 to 7 years for a step family to fully integrate. 4 to 7 years, not 4 to 7 months. That is a long time. So when you try to force connection or plan big family activities or push for quality time before the kids are ready, it backfires. They feel that pressure and they resist. It's not because they don't like you, it's because of the family structure, right? You end up more disconnected than before. The better approach is to let the relationship unfold at their pace. Be present, be consistent, but don't force it. One-on-one time is really important for you to get with your stepkids, but only if they're up for it. Don't ever force them to go have family fun with you when they're not ready. If they're hesitant or hostile, take a pause. And I know that it can feel hurtful and I know that it can feel like it's taking forever, but it does take a long time, right? All right, so let's get practical. We have talked about all of this stuff. Let's talk about how you actually talk to your stepkids in a way that opens the door for connection, okay? First of all, it depends on their age, and we've alluded to this a little bit. What works with a 6-year-old is not going to work with a 16-year-old and vice versa. All right, so let's talk about younger kids. With younger kids, the goal should really just be to keep it simple and reassuring. They don't need big, heavy conversations. They just need to know they're safe, they're loved, and the adults in their life have their back, right? So some conversation starters that can work if they're talking about it or having reactions, say to them something like, "Hey, I know you didn't ask for this, and I get that it's hard," right? That's such a reassuring statement. How about, "It's okay if you miss your other house. It's also okay if you wish your parents were back together, or if you have mixed feelings about me. That doesn't hurt my feelings. I know that you're in a tough place." Now, only say that if it actually doesn't hurt your feelings, but that can go such a long way for kids to feel like you are a safe place for them and they can fully be themselves, right? Now, if you think that they're struggling with what to call you, or if they feel like you want them to call you mom or something like that, let them know, reassure them, "Hey, you don't have to call me anything you're not comfortable with. You can call me by my name, and that is totally fine." The key with younger kids is really just validation. You're not trying to fix anything or solve anything right now. You're just naming what they might be feeling and letting them know that those feelings are okay, right? The more that you can take an approach of curiosity and just being open with them, the more you'll feel safe to them. And here's another big one, and this should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, just in case. Don't ever ask them if they like you more than their other parent, right? Don't ask them if they're happy that you're here. Those kinds of questions put them in a really impossible position. And even if they feel like they're going to answer it, you might not like the answer they give you, right? Just be consistent and let them come to you when they're ready. All right, so let's talk about older kids, like the tweens and teens, because we know that they're challenging, right? And I often have conversations with stepmoms where there's a behavioral issue and I say, "Hey, let's pull back a little bit. Let's talk about whether this behavior is a result of the step family dynamic or whether this is a teen thing, because we know teens can be jerks, right? Let's be real." So the approach is different with older kids. They are more aware of things. They're more aware of the dynamics, and newsflash, they have more opinions, right? And they're probably a lot more guarded. So with teens, your job is really just to acknowledge the elephant in the room, name the awkwardness, give them permission to feel however they feel. It's not dissimilar from the conversation with the younger kids. It's just a little more sophisticated, right? So a few things you can say. It's okay if you wish things were different. I am not trying to replace anybody. That's a really good reassuring statement, right? Hey, I know this is weird. Guess what? It's weird for me too. But I am here and I care about you and I'm not going anywhere. It must be confusing going back and forth between houses. If you want to talk about it, I'm here. That leaves the door open to them and gives them a little bit more of a feeling of control about kind of their destiny, really, The goal with teens is to create safety without pressure. You are not forcing them to open up. You're just letting them know that your door is always open if they want to walk through it, right? So let me share a story that can show the power of this approach. And this was a hard conversation that I had with my stepdaughter. So we were in the car one day. She was a teenager. And out of nowhere, I don't know what had her thinking about this, but she said, "Does it ever feel weird that all your friends have kids and you don't have any kids of your own?" Now, she was not asking in a mean way. She wasn't being a jerk about it. She was genuinely curious, and I could tell that. I could have deflected. I could have changed the subject. And honestly, if she had been a few years younger, I would have, right? I would not have had the conversation with her. But I thought about her age. I thought about the nature of my relationship with her. And we had been bonded pretty solidly, pretty early on. And I thought about her maturity level. And so when I responded, I told her about the 5 rounds of IVF that her dad and I had tried. I did not go into the dirty details, okay? I did not talk about the hormones, the emotional roller coaster, the grief. I didn't talk about my feelings every time I hear a friend talk about how she feels as a mother. That is a little needle in my side every time one of my friends says it, even though I'm so happy for them all. And if you've ever been through IVF or fertility issues, you know that feeling I'm talking about when you're so happy for your friends, but you kind of carry this grief inside you. I didn't get into all that, right? That wouldn't have been appropriate. I just kind of kept it surface, but I answered her question honestly. And you know what happened? She didn't get uncomfortable. She leaned in, she asked more questions, and we had this really beautiful conversation. It was vulnerable, but it deepened our relationship. And that moment taught me something really unexpected. And that is that kids, especially teens, can handle honesty, right? You don't want to give them all the dirty details, but you can be honest. They can handle the vulnerability. And I think depending on your relationship, they appreciate it, right? What they can't handle is fakeness. They can smell it a mile away. So be real and be human and trust that your beautiful, authentic self is going to create that connection. The other thing I want to say is that kids of all ages really appreciate it when the adults in their lives own their mistakes. When you can say, "I'm sorry" to a kid, and this is whether they're your stepkid or your biological kid, it lets them know that you are human and it makes them feel more comfortable owning their actions too. That was one of the first things I noticed about my husband when we got together and I spent time around him with the kids was that he was able to apologize to them if he had been too sharp with them or whatever. And I was like, wait, parents can apologize to kids? I mean, I was stunned because that just was not something I grew up with. I've never heard my parents apologize. Nothing against my parents. It's just not what happened in my house. And I thought it was amazing that he could do that. And I've noticed that our kids own their stuff. I mean, they're willing to apologize when they know they've done something wrong. And so I think it's a wonderful gift that you can give your kids if they can see you apologizing. All right. So we have talked about a lot of stuff. Let's talk lastly about what happens when your stepkid says something that really cuts you, right? It happens. You're not my mom. I wish you weren't here. You've ruined my life. You don't get to tell me what to do. Those moments hurt. They feel like a punch in the gut. I'm not going to lie. But how you respond in those moments matters so much. When they say you're not my mom, first of all, they're right. You're not. And trying to argue with them or defend yourself is just going to make it worse. So you can try some variation of, you know what, you're right. I'm not your mom and I'm not trying to be. I care about you and I'm an adult in this house and this family. And I want to be respectful of what you're going through, right? That response does a few things. It validates their feelings. It removes the power struggle and it reframes your role in a way that is less threatening. All right. So when they resist your authority, this is where a lot of stepmoms get stuck because You live in the house. You're responsible for them when your partner's not around. So, what are you supposed to do when you're by yourself with them and they refuse to listen? It's hard, right? My advice is to continue to steer clear of the discipline power struggle, especially in the early years. You have to let your partner take the lead when firmness is needed. That does not mean you have no boundaries, right? It just means you're strategic about when and how you enforce them. For example, if your stepkid's being disrespectful, you can say to them, "Hey, I hear that you are upset. I am not okay with being spoken to that way. Your dad and I are going to talk about this later, or your mom and I are going to talk about this later," whatever that looks like. You're holding the boundary with them without escalating it. And the thing is, kids are watching. They are watching to see if you're going to lose it. They're pushing you. They are watching to see if you are safe. And when you can respond with a calm firmness instead of anger or defensiveness, you are showing them you can be trusted, right? That 911 call I mentioned earlier, that was a moment that I realized the best thing I could do was stay calm and consistent, even when things are chaos, even when the cops are showing up at your front door, right? So let's talk about when it's not landing. You're doing all this, right? You're showing up with empathy. You're using age appropriate language. You're avoiding the common mistakes, and it is still not landing. What if your stepkids are still distant? They're still guarded. They're still resistant. First of all, take a breath. This is normal. It does not mean you're failing. It doesn't even mean that they hate you. It just means they're not ready yet. And that's okay. So here's what you need to do. Step back when you need to, okay? If you're feeling burned out or resentful, it is okay to take a step back. Let your partner handle the tough conversations. Let your partner take the lead on the emotional stuff. Your job is to take care of yourself so that you can show up in a healthy way. And sometimes that means creating a little bit of space. Go get together with your girlfriends. Go take a walk. But talk to your partner about how you're feeling so that you're on the same page and that they understand that you're taking a step back and that it's just temporary. But make sure you're taking care of yourself. Make sure that you're taking care of each other, right? The other thing is to keep showing up calmly and respectfully. And I've said this a few times, but even if the bond takes time, even if it takes years, keep showing up. Keep being consistent. Keep being kind. Here is the truth. The seeds that you're planting right now may not bloom tomorrow, but they will bloom. They will bloom. I have proof of this. My stepdaughter, the one who asked me about not having kids of my own, she was applying to college a few years ago, and she asked me to look over her college essay. Her dad and I were both English majors, so that was, an easy thing for her to ask us to do. I had no idea what she'd written it about. I was just going to give her some feedback. I read the essay and I burst into tears because the essay was about me. It was about the emotional support I'd given her, how much she had looked up to the career that I had had, about the life lessons and the impact I had made. After years of showing up, having these little conversations, being present even when I had no idea if she cared, right? That essay said everything. So if you're in the thick of it right now, if it feels like nothing you do makes a difference, I want you to hear this. It does. It just takes time. And the fact is, with your relationship with your stepkids, you may never have an essay written about you. They may never tell you how much you mean to them, but I promise they're feeling it. All right. So let's wrap this up. These conversations with your stepkids, they are not about getting it perfect. Nobody's perfect. They don't expect perfection from you. It's about showing up with patience and presence and empathy. It's about being the safe adult who doesn't judge, who doesn't pressure, and who makes space. You don't have to do it alone. There are plenty of other stepmoms out there who are going through this also. I have a Step Family Circle membership where inside we talk about, how to talk to our stepkids and our spouses and the ex. We go through coaching and real life examples to help you do this with confidence, even when things feel really hard or really fragile. We practice the conversations. We talk through the hard stuff and we support each other through all of the messiness. So if you are ready to stop second guessing everything you're saying, everything you're doing, start building connection with your stepkids, head over to stepfamilycircle.com and join us. Your voice matters and your connection with these kids is worth fighting for. And if this episode resonated with you, would you do me another favor? Share it with a stepmom who needs to hear it. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps more than you know. With this, we will close it out and I will be back in your ears next week. And remember, you have got this.